Добрый день. Добрый день.
Hello. Hello, good morning to everyone.
Happy to see all of you. Дорогие
Dear participants of today's seminar, my name is Andrius Kubilius. I will be speaking Russian. I am a member of the European Parliament. I was the Prime Minister in Lithuania, and now I am in the European Parliament. I'm the rapporteur on Russia and the Parliament delegation in the Assembly, which handles all the Eastern Partnership countries, including Belarus. Today, we have a unique event, I believe, because there are three groups of participants here today. First, I welcome the participants from Russia, from various Russian cities. I welcome the representatives of Democratic Belarus, and I welcome my colleagues from the European Parliament. What unites us is one word: democracy. This event, this seminar, this conference is also a demonstration of our solidarity with the struggle that you are carrying out in your countries for democracy. Solidarity with those who have been arrested, solidarity with leaders like Alexei Navalny, like Viktor Babaryka and Sergei S.Tsikhanouskaya, leaders like S.Tsikhanouskaya. Indeed, after what we saw last year, after what we saw in Belarus, given what we see in Russia today, democracy is the most acute issue in our discussion. You are fighting for democracy, and we are trying to understand how we can help you, protect democracy. And there are a lot of similarities between what is happening in Belarus and what is happening in Russia. People want change. It is clear, it is evident. They want democratic change. They want free elections where they can speak their mind. Authoritarian regimes, both Lukashenko's and Putin's, are very similar in their activities, in their brutality, in their disregard for human rights. And they act at the level that makes us think that we need to introduce probably new sanctions, that we need to apply new tools to protect your rights. And that's what we are going to talk about today. We are going to share different points of view, Russian, Belarusian, and our point of view on behalf of the European Parliament. I'm really happy that we are doing this event as an initiative of our informal forum, Friends of European Russia, and our Eastern Partnership Forum, together with the Boris Nemtsov Foundation and the Democratic Development Foundation. And I would like to give the floor to Sergei Medvedev, our moderator, who represents the University of Moscow. Sergei, the floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you, Andrius. My name is Sergei Medvedev. I'm a professor of Free University in Moscow. It is a new institution where a lot of teachers and professors work after they have been dismissed in connection with their political views from other educational establishments in Russia. I also host shows on Radio Free Europe and Anastasia Время channel. I'm happy to welcome you, and I would like to say that the beginning of 2021 has been a remarkable time here, because the events that have been happening have intensified in Russia, in connection with the return of Navalny, in connection with the arrests, the protests that have been happening in multiple Russian cities. There are 12,000 people who have been detained, which is a high score for now. And it's really interesting that in this panel, we're going to talk both about Russia and Belarus, because we see that there are two clear dictatorships that are evident at the beginning of 2021. Belarus and Moscow. And as we have the saying, Moscow suddenly arrived in Minsk. We know that events in Belarus kind of foretell what is going to happen in Russia in a few years. And it's interesting that Moscow is actually undergoing what Minsk has gone through, what happened last year there. And we are going to talk to representatives of the protest movement today. So now I would like to invite Zhanna Nemtsova from the Boris Nemtsov Foundation to speak, and then we are going to speak with another of our co-hosts. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Zhanna Nemtsova. I am the co-founder of Boris Nemtsov Foundation. I'm a journalist. Thank you very much to everyone who has organized this conference. I'm happy to be here. What can I say? I will be very brief. You know, on the 10th of January, I arrived in Moscow to visit my family, and I somehow ended up in the center of all these events because in a few days, Alexei Navalny announced his return, and I understood that I couldn't leave. I understood that he would be most probably arrested, and of course, I wanted to support him. So on the 23rd of January, I participated in protest in Nizhny Novgorod, which is where I was born. And I did want to participate in protests in Moscow, but I was blocked. My mom and I took maybe 20 steps and we were stopped from going further. And on the 2nd of February, I was outside the court. And what can I say about this? First, I was really surprised by the number of people who were there in Nizhny Novgorod. I think there hasn't been a single demonstration of that size in the city history. The protest has gotten much younger. These are completely new people that I saw there. That's remarkable. In addition, those people are quite fearless. That's something that impressed me. I saw those people in Moscow, in Nizhny Novgorod, and the same things are happening in other cities. And I think those protests are different from many protests that we could observe in Russia before. This is the beginning of a national political movement against the current administration. On the other hand, I had never seen this number of Russian guards and special security services. It seemed like it was military warfare happening because there were about 3,000 security forces there. I don't even know how to describe this. Maybe they were there to people who were supposed to maintain the order or something. But anyway, the number of law enforcement officers in the streets shows that the authorities are extremely scared of what is happening. And maybe they even realize that this is the beginning of the end for them, even though, of course, social change doesn't necessarily mean quick political change. I think this is the start of this trend, this demand for political change. I will be wrapping up here. I will also be participating in the panel representing both Moscow and Nizhny Novgorod. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Zhanna. You will have another 5 minutes to share your impressions about the demonstrations. And now I would like to invite Anastasia Karimova of the Foundation for Democratic Development. Hello, dear friends. It's a big honor to speak at this panel. I'm extremely thankful to our allies, our friends from the European Parliament. This support is invaluable during this difficult time. I represent the Foundation for Democratic Development here. It is a non-commercial organization founded by Russians who live all across the world. And the purpose of our foundation is the support of Russian civil society and the social and economic development of Russia. I participated in protests since I was young, since 2004. I remember very well how this politics looked like in the beginning of the aughts, and I remember the protest demonstrations in Minsk on Chernobylsky Shlyakh, and I participated in those protest actions. But it was perceived that the situation in Belarus was very difficult, and it seemed like the same situation would never happen in Russia. The same political repercussions would never happen in Russia. So I remember those impressions back in my younger days. And of course, now it's very difficult to understand that we are very close in terms of repressions to our friends from Belarus. Of course, I think that what started happening in Belarus last year is a big factor in terms of what is happening in Russia now. It perhaps encouraged Russian activists, made them braver, and it's an extremely important discussion. I'm thankful to everyone who is participating in this conversation here today. So over to Sergei Medvedev again. Thank you very much, Nastya. And we are starting our panel. The first part will be dedicated to Russia. The second part will be dedicated to Belarus. And now I would like to give the floor to acquaintance Denis Volkov, who is a sociologist and deputy director of Levada Center, who is a participant of the Russian protest movement and studies the Russian attitude to protest. And he is a fellow with Manchester University. Denis, you have 10 minutes. I will be following the timeline. We have a very clear timeline today, so I will be very strict about this. I will be telling you when to stop, so please make sure that you adhere to the timeline. You're welcome. Hello, I will try to talk about the changes in the attitudes that led to the protests, which we have been observing for multiple years now. I think that to understand what is happening, 2018 was an important year. It was the pension reform, which was, of course, perceived as unfair by the majority of the population. And in many ways, it launched the situation that we observe. But the growth of dissatisfaction, which we observe, was, of course, accumulating over years. The past 4 or 5 years, it was the economic growth slowing down and the income dropping. The administration had lower ratings. People had more protest attitudes. They were more ready to protest. And during 25 years after that happened, we see that people are still ready to protest. So people do not think that the authorities will do things the way they want. That's why more and more people want to stand up for their understanding of how this should work, stand up for their rights. And that's what we saw in 2018. That's what we saw across various small-scale protests in 2019, 2020. What is important here? In 2018, it was the year that launched these changes. And in our surveys, in our studies, we see that these changes were the fastest among the youngest audience. While before 2018, we could call young people the Putin generation because they were among those who supported Putin's regime. Today, the situation is quite different. And today we observe among young public, perhaps not the youngest, but people of ages 20 to 30 are the most critical people today. They are most critical of the government. Of course, that also includes the poorest people who are always critical of the government. but the protest attitudes today are focused among those people. In 2020, young people were people with the highest levels of protest attitudes. And we see that protest attitudes, especially in 2020, was evident towards all government initiatives. Also, there is a group of the elderly who are hopeful about the government and Putin. There is also this sort of division between those who use social media and those who watch TV, because social media is a territory of freedom, so to speak. It is a territory of high quality information, of free information. It partly reminds people of what was happening in the country in the 90s when new free journalism was flourishing. Why is it important now? Because for the past 2 or 3 years, we see an explosion of YouTube, of Instagram in Russia. So these are all channels with visual content. It's not just about popular channels, about video blogs. There are a lot of them. There is Redakция. There are a lot of channels dedicated to political activism. And in the past couple of years, they have basically exploded because this environment for mass consumption of this project has developed, type of content has developed. Because and that's why we have this division, because younger people do use social media more than the older generation who still watch TV, which is controlled by the government. And we see this development not just of attitudes towards the situation, but understanding of the situation, understanding what is happening in the country and across the world. This was the first time in 2019 that we recorded this in our surveys, when there were protests concerning the dismissal of independent candidates to the Moscow City Duma. We saw that events of district scope, not even city scope or municipal scope, they grew into events of federal scope. So the entire country was following these events. The entire country was following how opposition candidates were not allowed to participate. So this is the first time when we saw this division between the young and the elderly, between internet users and TV viewers. This was the first time, and then 2020 showed that the attitudes were critical about all events. To the zeroing in of Putin and the protest in Belarus. All these groups have completely opposing views, even though, of course, I will say that, of course, not all young people are interested in politics and not all of them are critical, but most of them are indeed.
And of course, not all the elderly support Putin. Nonetheless, I would say these are the trends. What do we see now? We can say that the situation is still changing and emerging. There is not so high a support we used to see in 2017, 2016, when we had the elections. And we now can say that the tactics in the past was like this, to bring all the supporters to the elections in order to deactivate all the people who are against the current rule. And I guess the administration are going to still stick to this strategy or tactics, and part of the society that are not in favor of the ongoing developments, now these people could not be called marginal share of the society. The portion is quite big, up to 50% of the entire society. Still, if these people do want to show up, to stand up for their values, they have to go ahead in terms of the elections. Of course, it depends on whether these people will be allowed to participate in the elections. Alternative politicians have to be as active as possible to campaign and attract more and more people to present their visions, their programs. Let's look at Navalny. Today, he is most interesting for us as the single alternative political leader. He talks about wonderful Russia of the future. He's talking about what's going to be different in the future. We have to focus on that, just that. And then again, speaking about alternative politicians, it's important to create the communication channel with your audience. At cross-national level, we see not only Navalny, I'm sorry, I'm about to finish. We see Yashin, Bondarenko from Saratov, these people who succeeded in creating communication channel and thus promoting their agenda. We are talking about democracy here. For me, at least in Russia, democracy is not about values. It's not about some presuppositions. There are about 30% of people who perceive democracy like this. I'm rather talking about democracy and mean that we provide for the accountability of the authorities. Arkhangelsk, Shies, Yekaterinburg, Bashkortostan, all the protests in these places across the Russian Federation sometimes showed positive results. The authorities still tries to counter these protests, oppress them. There are some opportunities, not many of them, but still, I would wrap up here. Thank you, Denis. Let me remind those of you who are watching us now,
interpretation, перевод, right? You can click on this button and you will hear it in English or in Russian. And for those who, for any reason, will not be able to listen for interpretation, both language versions will be posted after processing the recording. So they will be uploaded to YouTube, right? And finally, if anyone has a question to any of the speakers, there is a chat function. Да, если у кого-то есть вопросы к спикерам, то, пожалуйста, пишите их в чат и по возможности.
If you have any questions for our speakers, you can use Q&A section or chat box here. So let's move on. We have our Russian panelists, and Andrey Fateyev from Tomsk will be the first. He is a volunteer from Navalny office in Tomsk, and he is the deputy of the 7th convocation of the Tomsk City Duma. He participated in 2 protest actions and was detained, but now he's back and we are happy to see him here with us. You have 5 minutes, Andrey. Can you hear me well? Great. I not only participated, but also organized these protest actions in Tomsk. The police in Tomsk were quite calm, I would say. We didn't have any provocative developments. We were detained for a day and we were to pay some fines. On 23rd in Tomsk, we had this large-scale gathering, over 3,000 people, minus 20 degrees Celsius, and this was unauthorized rally. So for Tomsk, this is something totally new. It speaks for itself. 3,000 people. We can think how many more stayed at home due to various reasons. Maybe 10 times more people would have taken to the streets provided other circumstances were there. So I can say that Tomsk is a bit different from many other Russian regions. Last year, we had unexpected election results for the United Russia. Prior to that, Duma had 33 members from the United Russia. Now we have much lower numbers of these politicians. What else can I say? There are more politically active residents of the city of Tomsk, and this is a significant change. This big rally on 23rd is easily traced on social media and their activity on social media. We can observe that people started being more active in terms of voting in the elections. Last year election turnout rate was low, about 20%. On the other hand, a big advantage is that we have certain traditions of election observation, and as a result of that, our elections are quite transparent and quite fair, unlike many other regions of Russian Federation. So we saw the United Russia party losing with 17 votes only. If we had some muddled results, we would definitely have seen United Russia winning. I can say that in the city we have this capacity to provide necessary numbers of observers. Unlike the Tomsk region, we don't have the number of people who would be ready to spend 3 days observing the elections, plus the logistics. It's much more difficult for us to organize the observations. On the other hand, I can say this year we had an unexpected advantage. Last time we organized observations, we found the people. Actually, we were able to cover over 50% of all the districts. And in the city, we had the supporters paying to the observers to cover all the polling stations. And it was great. I guess now we have to focus our efforts on helping people believe their vote could change something. We have to help people understand how much depends on their vote. And once we look at the turnout rate, 20%, it means 4 out of 5 people didn't go to vote. When we see higher rates, we would be able to speak about more active political position and better results. That's it. I understand that Tomsk is a city of the universities, 7 universities, if I'm not mistaken. What can you say about the age of the protesters? In fact, it's clear that, actually the city is quite young anyways. Large portion of the population of the city are young people. I wouldn't say that the age change was so visible during these latest protests. It's similar to what we saw before. Okay, thank you. Age is an important issue. Next, I would give the floor to Andrey Pirozhkov from Yekaterinburg. And now when people get to the detention centers, if those detained are under 27, they are asked, why aren't you serving the army? I know that Andrey used to work and be member of the Communist Party. Then he left the party, and now he is the leader of the movement in Sverdlovsk region to have the direct mayoral election. So now he is facing the trial with the consequences to be sent to the army. What can you comment here? Good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Andrey Pirozhkov. I'm a deputy of Yekaterinburg City Council. I have a couple of points I prepared. As for the military service, I am ready to comment on that, especially in terms of the current developments, and those of you who are thinking about whether or not to go and take to the streets, I would say you should definitely go, and I will explain what I mean. First, let me focus on democracy. This is the main topic of ours now. We do have certain discussions in Yekaterinburg Duma that are related to living standards. My colleagues and I regularly organize some initiatives to improve the living standards of the citizens, like transport fares or salaries or number of parks and so on and so forth. Like you said, I'm trying to promote this direct mayoral elections in the cities of Russia. I have spent many years in the Communist Party, like you mentioned. I spent many nights in detention centers earlier, and now when we talk about the outrage and these protest movements, current protest movements in Russia, there are certain points that have to be considered when the authority acts in a way that decreases the living standards. This is totally clear to the people, and people are taking to the streets for that, for improving their living standards. And what we see now is slightly different. We have these two opposing leaders, two opposing figures, Putin versus Navalny. And I would say that's not a democratic way. Honestly, I do not know what kind of program Navalny has. What is he planning to do about the living standards of the Russians? I do not understand completely what for people are taking to the streets when they go out and support Alexei Navalny. Yesterday, Navalny was a liberal, and today he sounds like a communist. Tomorrow he might sound something else and might say some other things. I don't like it that there is a monopoly for the protest movement. So what I'm trying to say is the authority can be and has to be criticized. Yeah, there is this saying that means the authority has to be criticized at all times, but I don't want to see Goebbels type criticism. I wouldn't like to choose between Putin or Navalny. I don't want to have this poor choice out of two politicians. That's a big problem in my view. Let's mention the video investigation that was released. And it's one of the key reasons why people were influenced and took to the streets. We can see some fake facts. That's what I call Goebbels type information and campaigning. I wouldn't say this is a positive thing. One more point I would like to stress. The number of people taking to the streets in different cities. Let's not forget about the total number of the populations of these respective cities. 1/10 of the population of Yekaterinburg. Points after decimal point. These are the real numbers. We don't have to deal with the absolute numbers. We have to deal with the relative numbers. We have to compare the number of protesters with the total number of the population. There are some people that still are satisfied with the current authority. We don't have to generalize. Andrey, I'm sorry. I have to try and stick to the schedule. We have so many people. One more sentence. Dear colleagues, one more phrase. The current situation, the gathering we have here in Zoom today, the Western countries keep criticizing Russia, Ukraine, and other ex-USSR countries for interference with Cuba and other countries. But now we have the opposite direction situation where the Western countries are trying to interfere with the processes in Russia. Actually the agenda of the USSR was quite similar. They wanted to try and help the Cuban people to improve their living standards. And what do we see as a result? Like, for example, in Ukraine, the economic situation worsened so much. We have to revisit the current developments, and we have to make a differentiation between the programs and people coming from outside and teaching us democracy. Thank you, Andrey. Let me give the floor to Ekaterina Duntsova from Rzhev, Tver region.
She's a coordinator of Sova Volunteer Department, and she is an independent member of the local Duma. If you can make it in 4 minutes, please go ahead. Yeah, I understood that I would have to be brief. Yeah, by the way, I'm also a member of the initiative group for free elections, which Andrey also knows about. I also want to support Artem Vazhenkov, who is now in detention in Tver. He is a very kind person who went through a lot of things in Belarus. He came to Tver all beaten up and miserable, and now he is arrested again. He recommended me to participate here, so I'm very thankful to him. First of all, I would like to say who participated in protests. I wouldn't call them protests, I would call them campaigns. People feed ducks and stuff like that. They were adult people. All school children were identified. People talked to their parents, and the police insisted that they stay at home. On the 31st the liberation movement joined us. There were those slightly insane people, in my opinion, who were giving out pro-Putin newspapers and stuff. I would agree that today we have a completely different audience of protests. I was on Bolotna in 2012. There were all kinds of events in Petersburg before. So in 2012, I was participating, and I was a bit shocked about the audience. There were some elderly women there. Some people were talking about some space race, about some tinfoil hats. Maybe they were just some marginal phenomena that were there in the square, but it was really strange. But now the audience is completely different. And first of all, I would like to say that this is because of the absence of dialogue with the authorities. In Rzhev, we feel that people just want to speak their mind. They really do want to say what they think, but they don't have a platform for this. I'm not from the Communist Party. Between 2000 and 2009, I was in a Single Russia Party. And then I quit in 2009 on principle because I understood that nobody was going to save us, that this was not the party that I wanted to be affiliated with. So I decided to be an independent candidate on principle, and I decided to be a member of the local Duma on the municipal level independently. I think it's important to be people's deputy, to be people's representative on that level. As for the electoral activity, of course, it is low. And that is the main reproach that I have for the current government. I always said, as a representative of the Free Elections Coalition, who do you want to bring them back for? I think the main task for the opposition now is to encourage people to participate in the elections, to attend the elections. And this activity ensures this understanding of democracy that there should be. I actually talked to one of our other participants about this soldier monument. So just saying hello. Thank you, Ekaterina. I like now to give the floor to Marcel Shasmudinov, who is a member of Tatarstan People's Front. He is also a member of a local parliament in an urban type settlement in Tatarstan. Please turn on the mic and the floor is yours. Can you hear me now? Hello? Kazan, Tatarstan, Marcel Shamsudinov. My opinion about the current situation is as follows. Apart from our democratic movement and engaging the broad part of people in politics, finally, there is the opposite side. It is our current regime. It is regressing, as always. There is degradation. We are still far from it now, but this regime will fall apart. And the main task of the democratic movement is identifying clear, normal goals. I participated in protests on the 23rd, on the 31st of January, and indeed there were mostly young people of ages 25 to 30, I would say. On the 23rd, there were also a lot of people of my age, so more and more population groups participated. There were no school children, as the central television lied. As far as I understand, the European Parliament is listening to us. So I would like to say that the Russian society is weak. It is not political literate. It doesn't understand the connection between the democracy and freedom, elections and control and accountability of public officials, like it works in a feudal regime, like the one that exists in Russia. It is a very direct connection, but most people don't understand this. We need to improve political literacy. We need to improve political education. On the 23rd and the 31st, young people were saying, why are we walking? Why are we hanging out here? People were quickly arrested there. As you probably know, Kazan came in third in terms of the number of people arrested after Moscow and St. Petersburg. So I would like to address members of the European Parliament, first of all, because a lot of things depend on them. We will handle it by ourselves too, but I guess it will take us about 20 years. And only the next generation will succeed. And my 3 children are going to keep living under this feudality. On the 23rd, 76 journalists were arrested in Kazan. They had badges, they had vests that said press, and they were still arrested, they were detained. Journalists were showing their licenses that they were journalists, and a law enforcement officer told them, I don't care, I have an order. Of course, there were some curse words there too, but you understand, they don't care about the law. They only care about what their boss tells them. If we continue this track of logic, if this boss tells them to shoot tomorrow, they will shoot. So I would like to address our Western colleagues, not as a request, but just as a call to stand in solidarity with the Russian people, with their friends, and to introduce even more specific targeted sanctions against the social group which supports this feudality, this authoritarianism, against those people who forge elections. We had a colleague from Tomsk speaking here. I have been in politics for 30 years, and I assure you, you don't have enough time. Voters here vote just like in Tomsk, but the elections are completely forged. There is election fraud happening. So we need sanctions against governors, against deputy governors who prohibit demonstrations, who prohibit rallies, who don't approve them. Against the Ministry of General Affairs officers, against their deputies, against all officials who stop freedom of speech. Those sanctions will undermine the basis of the authoritarian regime. And if there is no change in half a year, the ministry will prohibit people from going to the West. Okay, Marcel, thank you very much. You gave us very specific suggestions, and I'm sure that members of the European Parliament are listening to us and hear you. And I would like to give the floor to Zhanna Nemtsova, who is a very well-known person in Nizhny Novgorod. I don't need to introduce her. I will need less than 4 minutes because I have said enough already. I represent Nizhny Novgorod today only because Roman Trygov, coordinator of Navalny's headquarters in Nizhny Novgorod, couldn't join us. He was doing his administrative punishment, and probably under torture, he recorded a video message that he is giving up protest activity, and he refuses to be the coordinator of Navalny's headquarters. So what can I say? First thing, Nizhny Novgorod had the biggest protest in the entire history of the city. About 10,000 people participated. If you look at the number of those people compared to the general population, maybe that's not a lot. There are a lot of people who support the protesters, but they stayed at home because they are afraid. Even drivers in the city center were all honking their horns in support of the protesters. What is happening in Nizhny Novgorod, what's happening in Russia, is the beginning of the new political movement, and its main demand is change of the administration. For many years, people have been demanding change. And nobody listens to those people. The authorities still carry out the pension reform. They still do whatever they want. And that's the main demand of the protesters. Not all of them supported Navalny. It was a protest for the sake of changing the government. Of course, Navalny is a big figure in this, but the main demand is changing the regime. The problem of why people take to the streets is the fact that there is no representation. A lot of Russian population is not represented in the legislative branch, in the executive branch. And of course, the situation generates the political crisis that we see. Of course, according to those people who take to the streets and who support this protest, is that they don't see a different solution to this issue. They don't see a different way how to demand a change of the government. That's it. I'm done. Thank you. Thank you for being brief, Zhanna. I will support what Zhanna just said. We just talked to an anthropologist who worked in Moscow and in Petersburg at protests, and she confirmed this. A lot of protesters said that we don't support Navalny, we don't agree with Navalny, we are protesting for the sake of a political reform, we want to defend our dignity. Of course, these protests are connected with Navalny, but a lot of people who have been detained and who have been protesting are not necessarily Navalny supporters. And now I would like to give the floor to Alexander Kirsanov, an activist of Navalny's headquarters from Vladivostok. He is 19 years old. We see this young generation protesting, facing army mobilization. Alexander, the floor is yours. Thank you. I'm not being mobilized to the army. I'm a student. But I would like to talk about the east, namely Khabarovsk, Vladivostok. And at the meetings on the 23rd and the 31st of January in Vladivostok, we saw those were the biggest rallies during the past 10 years or so. In Vladivostok, the last time we saw this level of violence was when a protest was dispersed in 2008. The situation is quite threatening. Protests in Vladivostok have always been quite low in numbers. There were just a few dozen, a few hundred people protesting, and now we had 3,000 people taking to the streets. And those people faced law enforcement officers who brutally dispersed and detained them. On the 31st of January, law enforcement blocked the central square, and people decided to go to the riverbank, and law enforcement started forcing people to go to the ice. I think it was completely shocking for everyone. When a person was detained, he had his leg shot. This was the first time this happened in Vladivostok. I don't remember this personally in the past 5 years, at least in Vladivostok. In 2008, the protesters still didn't have guns shooting at them. In Khabarovsk, we could see this big uproar in the city. There were a lot of people taking to the streets. It was 1 in 6 people in the population participated in the protest, but gradually this protest started diminishing. People started getting tired. And eventually this protest turned into feeding pigeons. In Khabarovsk, we see a lot of repressions against journalists. Now, journalists are being detained. They are being put in jail, and law enforcement officers don't care about their press cards. They don't care about their licenses. They don't care about their vests, which say press. Even though the legislation of the Russian Federation prohibits law enforcement from doing that, they don't care about this. The situation is quite daunting. And I would like members of the European Parliament to pay attention to the situation in Vladivostok and Khabarovsk. There was this announcement concerning Sergei Fugala recently. People's demands have not been heard. The situation with excessive violence is really upsetting. Thank you. Apologies, I muted myself. Thank you, Alexander. And thank you for reminding us of Khabarovsk. We see indeed that after many months of protest, Khabarovsk is not sort of being transferred to the entire Russia. There are some isolated cases of protest. In Khabarovsk, yeah, people are feeding pigeons, and Furgalo is facing charges. That's what is happening with Khabarovsk protests today. I would like to give the floor to Yuri Mazurik, a municipal member of St. Petersburg Duma. The election campaign in 2019 ended in his victory, and he was a participant of rallies in support of Alexei Navalny. 4 minutes, please. Please switch on your mic. Can you hear me now? Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to participate. It was announced correctly. I did participate in campaigns in 2014. I participated in the municipal election campaign in 2019 and I won. Here is what I want to say about St. Petersburg. Out of 111 municipalities and about 1,500 municipal deputies, almost 400 were elected through the so-called smart voting. In our municipality, we had about 30 candidates who wanted support of single Russia, and only 3 candidates won. And out of the 3 winners, 2 were head doctors in hospitals, and they won only due to votes from 1 electoral district where their hospital was located.
Therefore, this smart voting covered, so to say, 18 candidates, 16 out of whom won. You see the percentage of the winning candidates through the smart voting. It was about 90%. And speaking of the United Russia candidates, they had about 10% winning rate through the smart voting. As for the 23rd and 31st January, I attended St. Petersburg protests. I was one of the people who were campaigning quite actively. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I understand. I see. Yeah, your mic is off. Okay, so everyone knows that almost everyone from the Navalny office, Danilkin, they are all facing trials, and the majority of people from the Navalny office are detained. I'm free so far. On the merits, I would try and comment what Andrey Pirozhkov from Yekaterinburg said. First point, I am ethnical Ukrainian. I am one of 17 million Russians who have direct family ties with Ukraine. So I would tell you, there is no economic destruction there in Ukraine, and there is no outrage among the population. There are normal, natural processes and normal elections going on in the country. That was my first point. Second point, there is no problem with Alexei Navalny's views and program. Why? Because no one actually cares what candidate has which views. Most people taking to the streets do that because they are supporting Alexei Navalny personally in his situation. Nonetheless, there are still some people, because they are fed up with the forged elections, with lack of social lifts and so on and so forth. There are so many people aware of the classic democracy and classic notion of democracy, that this is something natural and normal. And these people do not care so much about the person winning. This is something secondary to the democracy itself. I wanted to just to comment. Thank you so much, Yuri, for your comments. We have to stick to the schedule. Yeah, I would wrap up here. I have a lot of questions about the next part of the discussion. I hope you will have a second or two to ask these questions later. Yeah, I also wanted to comment on what Andrey Pirozhkov was saying. I skipped it. We know these arguments. Do you want to have the situation similar to Ukrainians? Do you want to have this Maidan thing? We know all that. We have heard that so many times. And second point, Navalny is not a problem. Navalny is kind of a shield which we can carry in front of us. And we don't think, I don't think that people saying that Navalny is a dictator similar to Putin, they are insane. Once we get to the elections and normal elections, that's when we can discuss these things. They are irrelevant now. And last but not least, Maria Vayutskaya from St. Petersburg. She used to work as a teacher in the kindergarten, and she is now sitting at Municipal Duma. 3 minutes. Let's be brief, Maria. Okay. You mentioned the violence as one of my aspects of my expertise. I am specializing in psychological violence. If women do not have an opportunity to find a spot for her child in a kindergarten, it means she cannot have a normal career. A friend of mine had her child hospitalized last autumn, and their operation was scheduled for 2022. Can you imagine that? So women know in their own experience, and in their experience with their children, what's going on in the country. As a deputy of municipal council, I can say that women are usually silent, not because they don't have anything to say, but because they suffer from psychological violence. It's happening right now, even when we are talking. This violence is not about the police vans. It starts in the educational system. I attended one of the protests in St. Petersburg, and the most dreadful thing I've heard at one of these protests, it was said by a police officer. A lot of people were around us, and that was a great phrase. We are of different races. This was a key point about the sentiments among the law enforcement. My brother, a couple of years back, told me, if you express these outrage sentiments openly in the streets, we will be killing people like you. Isn't it dreadful? These police officers, they consciously violate the laws. They are enjoying that. With the current approach in education and other aspects of life, being silent, we support these violent people. We don't speak about our emotions. We are being bullied. We are being ridiculed. This is what is important. We have to try and explain this to women, what abuse is, what methods abusers tend to apply, what is Stockholm syndrome. When women understand these things, they review their lives. They understand how much they integrated this violence into their lives, and they start changing. This is what I think is important. Half of the population of Russia are women. The majority of women are victims of psychological violence, of abuse, and we are accomplices to this crime. We integrate this violence and abuse into our lives, and we start abusing our children. We need to have enough knowledge to try and change the situation. We have these gatherings in St. Petersburg. We are trying to improve the situation. We have a project. I was asked to tell about it. We have this contest for all the organizations. These could be funded by the public budget or NGOs. And we were asking about the level of trust. About 70 organizations received these signs from us. Red of 2020 from the Nutcracker fairy tale. Putin as the leader was addressed by various participants. They wrote some letters, and we also saw Zhirinovsky and other organizations up to Constitutional Court. The contest was won by these people, Putin, Zhirinovsky, and others, the Red of the Year. Maria, thank you so much for your story. What was important out of what you said is the violence and abuse start at home. These are two sides of the same coin. I'm happy to hear that from you. Let me hand over to our Belarus colleagues. Andrius, will you let us have 10 minutes more to give enough space to our Belarus colleagues? 11:20 until 11:20 your time. I see. It's okay. Yeah, I guess it's fine. We really need to give an opportunity to everyone to speak. Svetlana, political advisor to Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, Alexander Dobrovolsky, is going to present the colleagues from Belarus. Good afternoon, dear friends. Probably I'm not going to present everyone because not everyone is here yet. But anyway, let me see. Anatoly Lebedko is here, so he's going to speak. He is a representative of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya on constitutional reform. Anatol Kotau is also going to speak. He is from international policy sector. Olga Kovalkova, the member of Belarus Opposition Coordination Council, and maybe some of other colleagues will join us and they will introduce themselves. First of all, let me thank the organizers of this forum, Zhanna Nemtsova. In the first place, we were friends with her father, Andrius Kubilius, as well. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak and have a dialogue. I would say several words about my own sentiments. We here in Belarus, we're trying hard to improve the situation, to move towards democracy, and that has been happening for 26 years. What we were facing was insufficient public support. I mean, people were not ready to support us. And I'm sure you feel the same now in Russia. So we had not enough resources to launch this high-scale campaign and protests. And we, of course, wanted our voice to be heard. We understood that at some point, people would recall their own dignity. This point is when hope emerges. This point in time happened happened in Belarus in 2020, and you have similar moment in Russia now. I wish you all enough stamina in that process in order to provide the citizens, the people of the country with the choice, with decent choice. The administration, the current authority are always trying to use this agenda with enemies and build their arguments on some enemies and threats. And I am sure, I'm convinced that democratic Russia is the neighbor that is so great to have for us here in Belarus. And the same is true for the EU. Belarus people are really willing to have the EU as their good member, a good neighbor. Thank you so much for welcoming words. Now I'm giving the floor to Franak Viačorka. He is the advisor to Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and he's a journalist. You understand that we have very tight schedule, so please 3 to 4 minutes. Thank you so much for the invitation and this conference as a whole. We are now not frozen, not in the dead end. We are at the point we are about to have the final breakthrough. This is the final stage upon which the final results rely. We look at Russia now, and we wish you all have best results with minimum economic losses, and we wish us all to have new leaders, new faces. Let's have maybe some people from earlier opposition parties, but we want to have this diversity. Speaking of the international response, we were lucky enough here in Belarus, because at that point there were nothing acute happening in the world, and we took advantage of that international media, and we were supported by the international colleagues. On the other hand, we understand that that's not forever. The global political focus is shifting from one topic, from one country to another. It happened to us, and it's going to happen to you. That's the general trend. What are we focusing on now? We are trying to have this picture, protest picture. When there is no picture, there are no stakeholders seen. So we are trying to support this infrastructure. Secondly, we are trying to restore the structures destroyed by Lukashenko, courtyards and others, altogether called civil society. This is where I think we could work together with our Russian colleagues. We were lobbying Magnitsky list together. Now we are trying to prosecute the special police forces that violated all kinds of laws. We have to stay together to protect ourselves on international arena. And of course, we focus our efforts on our regime. We have some similarities and some differences as well. We are aware of the fear that the European and other Western politicians might have towards Putin. And this is a hurdle for them to support us. They don't want to have him mad. So we count on the next wave of protests in the following 5 to 6 months. They might coincide in time with the Russian protests, or they might be in different points in time. We now see that the current administration has had some damage, but it's still there. The difference of Belarus protests from the Russian protests is that we actually won at the elections. And what we are doing now, we are trying to stand up for the lawful results of the elections. Thank you, Franak. It's important for us to think about the differences between Belarus and Russia. The winning of the elections in Belarus is a real difference. And also national symbols are important, like your flag. This is what makes it different. What your protests are, why your protests are different from ours. In Ukraine, they also had this flag and other symbols that distinguished the opposing forces from the authorities. Now let me give the floor to Olga Kovalkova, Belarusian Christian Party member. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Coordination Council of Belarus, I would like to thank the organizers. Thanks for the invitation. It's important for us, really. The things that are unraveling in Russia, in Belarus, are not going to be reversed. The thing is, we have spent so many years in this Lukashenko's regime, and it was supported by Putin's money. And this makes it impossible for our citizens to be heard. our party says, and actually that's seen for everyone, that Lukashenko has lost his rating and his support. Alexei Navalny in Russia also demonstrated the loss of support by the people to the current administration. And we have to be ready to protect our rights and to stand up for what's important for us. We have to think about the opportunities we might provide each other with, how we can support each other and be to stand up together in solidarity.
I want to address our supporters in the European Union, and I want to urge you to be decisive, to be firm, just as firm as the Belarusian nation in their struggle. I think the result of the pressure of the Belarusian people on the illegitimate government should be the termination of this violence, of the torture. Violence and repressions do not resolve crises. The harsher violence is, the more hard the consequences will be for the country and for each of us. I am convinced that dialogue should become the start of these changes. I think a good solution would also be to create a joint address to the authorities, both Russian and Belarusian, urging them to stop torture, to free the protesters. People are being tortured today in inhuman conditions. They are being held in cells without warm clothes, without hygiene means, without the opportunity to talk to lawyers, without fresh air, in human degrading conditions. This is something that we need to speak about at every level to stop this violence. I think that solidarity and decisiveness should be the motto of international politics in 2021. Thank you for your attention. For our and your freedom together. Thank you very much, Olga. You were indeed very concise. We have the new Sakharova in Moscow. We have pictures from there with 25 people in 8-seat cells. So the parallels between two countries are just uncanny. Anatoly Lebedko, opposition politician, director of the Center for European Affairs. Anatoly, you're welcome. Hello, everyone from Minsk. We have a lot of things to do indeed. I would like to thank the organizers, and I would like to start from the evident discovery of 2020. It's Belarus and its citizens. While before we were pitied, we faced sympathy. After 2020, we are respected and admired. And I would like this admiration to continue. And I would like it to also expand to our Russian friends, colleagues, and partners. I will not speak about what has happened. You know it just as well as I do. I'm currently in Belarus, and here is my analysis. Today we have this guerrilla resistance, so to speak. The authorities or the supporters of change do not have enough power to achieve the result. The first thing that we need to think about is the economy. It is not about the supporters of Lukashenko, because inflation cannot be stopped with violence. Violence cannot attract investment in the country. So my forecast is that the economic situation will help the protesters. Today, you know, who was happy about protest in Russia together with Belarusian Democrats? It was actually Alexander Lukashenko. He was happy because it helps him strategically in the near future to try to invalidate the Sochi agreement, which gradually withdraws Lukashenko from the constitutional reform according to the Russian model, because the biggest problem today is Lukashenko's toxicity impacting the Kremlin. People who view the Russian Federation negatively is increasing, and that's a problem for the Russian Federation. We will see what is going to happen in the future. There was this ironic question, how soon will Putin grow Lukashenko-style mustache? And I think there are a lot of parallels between the two countries. There are a lot of similarities that our partners have talked about. So what will happen in the future? I think that the Kremlin does want to show that Putin is not the same as Lukashenko, and he doesn't want to support him eventually. So I would say that it is a big factor of what is going to happen. And another factor, an external factor, is going to impact the situation in Belarus is the Euro-Atlantic space. We have certain expectations with the administration headed by Biden, that now the Euro-Atlantic space will have a unified single policy in terms of Belarus and Lukashenko. And I think that if there are opportunities for cooperation between Belarusians and Russians going beyond our country, those who live outside these countries in embassies, etc., I think this can be done more actively, more energetically. And as for our Russian partners, I think we need to have more events like this, analyzing what is happening in Russia. For instance, in our Center European Dialogue, we are going to hold an event on the 15th together with Russian political activists and political figures, where we are going to analyze protests in Russia and Belarus, what is happening now and what can be done in this situation. And I think events like this need to be held more and more. Thank you to the organizers for this event. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anatoly. You were very clear and very concise. And we have another representative of Belarus, Anatol Kotau, who is a former diplomat who quit public service in the middle of protests, announcing it on Facebook. The floor is yours. Hello, and thank you very much. Thank you for organizing this event. The previous speakers talking about Belarus were quite clear about the numerous positions that unite us and also the ones that differ us. I don't know if we want the situation to be like the one in Ukraine, but we definitely want the situation to be like in Belarus. Belarus arrived in Russia very quickly in terms of its repressive protest action. And the question is only how far the Russian authorities will go imitating the worst practices of the Belarusian regime. It is necessary to say that, in our opinion, the situation in Belarus and Russia has one similar trait, is the solidarity of society in the format when the authorities just stopped listening to their society and doesn't show the slightest desire to listen to society. And this dismissive attitude, demonstrative dismissive attitude, is actually what fostered this protest attitude, as the previous Belarus speaker mentioned. Like he said, this year people no longer pity us, they respect us. I really hope this trend will continue. I really hope the victory is close. And this profound reason, the gap between the authorities' perception and the reality, and the fact that they stopped listening to society both in Russia and in Belarus, created quite an interesting situation in our countries. I would say that the situation is quite similar. According to our assessment, Alexei Navalny is one of the triggers of public dissatisfaction, but he cannot be considered. Well, the subject of the discussion was about Alexei Navalny's platform, and people in Belarus and in Russia don't protest in favor of a certain politician. They speak against the violence happening in both countries. And I agree with the speakers completely that the political platform is not quite entirely important here. The symbolism is not very important. What is important is that completely different political forces, which were completely different political wings on the opposite sides of the political spectrum, last year in Belarus and this year in Russia, they understood that they couldn't go on like this anymore, and they wanted to be respected. We do count on the support of our European partners, and we do count on the new administration in the US, represented by Joe Biden, who will hopefully play a much more active role in the international politics, including European politics, and in the support of European values. But using Belarusian experience, I would like to tell Russian colleagues that the national society is important, civil society in the country where you live. We are thankful to our European colleagues for their support on the international level. But if you want to support us in our activity, do it a bit more courageously, be a bit more bold, like my colleague Olga said. This support is valuable and important, but we would like to win together because, again, I agree with the previous Belarus speakers. The change that started last year is irreversible and inevitable. But we would like to win at a lower price for Belarus as a country, and Belarus as the Belarusian society. Because every day the current administration stays in the government, even if we look at the purely economic agenda, it costs a lot of money. I will be wrapping up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anatol, for your position, for your actions. I think I will sum up what our colleagues said. I would like to thank you for the bravery of your activity. Belarusian women, Belarusian population, the stories about torture that we read, the testimonies that we read, these all attest to the incredible courage of Belarusian people. So we feel ashamed, and at the same time we feel proud of our Belarusian friends. So I want to thank you all once again. And now I would like to give the floor to Andrius Kubilius, who will had the section about the European Parliament. I think it was important to listen to those voices from Russia, from Minsk, from Petersburg, and I am sorry that we took a bit too much time. Thank you very much, and Andrius, the floor is yours. Thank you, Sergei. We were muted a bit. I guess we are under constant attack, according to our host, so the interest is quite high. I would like to thank every speaker, both from Russia and from Belarus. I will probably switch to English, if I may, because we are going to speak with our friends from the European Parliament.
And just few comments before I will ask my friends from European Parliament to say their position. I see Vladimir Kara-Murza, whom we will have also shortly, we asked him to make some comments. We know him very well from our earlier earlier discussions, and we know very well his activities. But before I will ask Vladimir Kara-Murza, I would like to make just a few comments. I will not speak about things which are happening in Belarus and in Russia. Everything was explained in a very perfect way by our colleagues from Belarus and from Russia. Really, things which started to happen last year in Belarus now are continuing in Russia. That is major change, global change, and that is what is very important, not only for Belarusian people and Russian people with whom we are in very deep solidarity, but it's very important, of course, for first of all for Europe and for all the world. And in Europe, we learned also in European Parliament, we learned some lessons during last year. When we were trying to see how we can help Belarusian democracy movement, we saw that our instruments and our possibilities are not always the most effective ones. So that's why I would say that from my point of view, really in European Parliament, in all of the EU institutions, we need to look how to make defense of democracy the topic, the most important strategic topic for all of us. That should be the same topic as the fight against climate change and the fight against pandemic. In order to be more effective, we need really from EU, we need to look how to make our cooperation with our friends in the United States, deep and effective. And we need to look also what we are preparing to know how to switch policy and strategy of EU and the whole West towards Russia from what we had earlier, what I call Putin first strategy, to the strategy of democracy first. And in that strategy, we need to look into, as it was said by Olga Kovalkova and Anatol Kotau, we need to look how to make our instruments to assist those people who are fighting for democracy against authoritarian regimes much more effective, starting from personal sanctions and looking into really how to follow dirty money and so on and so on. So that's what we see as our priorities. And now I would like to ask Vladimir Kara-Murza to say a few words. Floor is yours. Vladimir.
Andrius, thank you very much. Спасибо большое. Как лучше в этой секции, по-русски или по-английски говорить?
Thank you very much, Andrius. Should I speak Russian or English? Whichever you like, we have translation.
Because this is a session with a discussion with members of the European Parliament. I want to first of all to thank the organizers of our conversation today, the Boris Nemtsov Foundation for Freedom, the Foundation for Democratic Development, and above all the forum, the Friends of European Russia at the European Parliament, and Prime Minister Kubilius personally. In one of his recent interviews, this was shortly before his poisoning last year, Alexei Navalny was asked on Echo of Moscow radio station, what is your plan? What is your program as the opposition? That's the question the anchor posed. And I suppose he maybe was expecting a long and drawn out and detailed response, with some programmatic points and detailed policies. Instead, Alexei responded with just one phrase. He said, we want Russia to be a normal European country. And to anyone who has studied Russian history, there is so many different things encompassed in those three words. And I think exactly the same response would go for our colleagues from Belarus as well. So Andrius, thank you for all your efforts at the European Parliament, you and your colleagues, with keeping up that fight, with keeping up that line for friends of a European Russia. And thank you also for combining this discussion, together with colleagues from Russia and colleagues from Belarus. Our two countries, of course, are the last two dictatorships in Europe. And I think the fate of those two last dictatorships in Europe is very much intertwined and interconnected. Back when Vladimir Putin came to power in our country 21 years ago now, and began doing many of the same things that Lukashenko had already been doing in Belarus, because of course he had a 5 or 6 years head start. Boris Nemtsov called Putin's actions the Lukashization of Russia, Lukashizatsiya России, because so many of the actions were similar, be it, the drives against independent media or political prisoners or murders of political opponents, falsification of elections, and so on. And now we're seeing, since last year and just in these past couple of weeks in our own country, we're seeing that thankfully this interconnectedness is manifesting itself in a good way as well, something that our Belarusian colleagues were just referring to also, this sort of similarity in the response of our societies in Russia and in Belarus against this dictatorship, against this usurpation. When the protests began in Belarus last August, many analysts were expecting a repeat of these protests on a mass national scale in Russia in the year 2024, when we have our own quote unquote presidential elections in the spring. But, things seem to be developing much, much faster. And what we've seen in the last 2 weeks across Russia, I think, has been, of course, very worrisome, but also very, very exciting, because it's very exciting to see the awakening of society. And I think Zhanna Nemtsova is absolutely right when she says that we are seeing a beginning of a truly national movement. It is a truly national movement from the Baltic to the Pacific. And I think one of the most defining characteristics of this movement is how young it actually is. Denis Volkov from the Levada Center in the first panel spoke about sort of the demographic composition of this movement. And it is a predominantly young movement. I mean, there was some snap surveys conducted at the protest the previous weekend, the 23rd of January, showed the median age of the protesters was about 31 years of age. That is a generation that spent their entire conscious lives, their entire adult lives under Vladimir Putin, and frankly, that have had enough of him. Once you see the same face on your television screens for more than 2 decades, I think anybody, even the most patient people, can have enough. And this is definitely what we're seeing. I do think it's the beginning, and I do think that this will continue and culminate in the mid-2020s, as Boris Nemtsov had always predicted. He always said that the public demand for change in Russian society will reach that critical point by the mid-2020s. He had several sort of explanations for this. They all came together in that time span, 2024, 2025. I remember some of us, including myself, were arguing with him because, many of us thought changes will come much quicker, but he, with his experience and his wisdom and his years of participation in Russian politics, I think his analysis was, of course, much more correct. And yes, I do think the mid-20s will be that big point of change in Russia. And the signs of this change are unmistakable, not just the protests we've been seeing in the past couple of weeks, but everything Denis Volkov talked about, all the clear trends in public opinion, especially among the young generation that we have been seeing. Also, the clear success of the smart voting initiative advocated by Alexei Navalny and his movement that we saw in the Moscow elections in 2019, in the local elections last autumn, and something that very likely will be manifested in the national parliamentary elections this coming September, when this growing public protest is channeled in tactical voting. Even once real opposition candidates are removed from the ballot, as happened in Moscow in 2019, pro-regime candidates are still sent to humiliating defeats, literally against nobody in many cases, just against some technical spoilers, as people are voting tactically to send a message. So this is on our side, on the Russian side. And, one of the favorite sort of lines of the Kremlin propaganda machine is that people like us, Russian opposition activists, Russian opposition leaders, that we go to the West and we supposedly ask foreigners to help us. We supposedly ask foreigners to give us money or to give us political support, or, to come and enact regime change in Russia. Of course, as I don't need to tell you, none of that has anything to do with reality. Only Russian citizens can and should, and I may add will, change the political situation in our country. The only thing we actually do ask of our Western friends and partners is that they not be complicit, is that they not enable the continued functioning of the Putin kleptocracy, and that they do not lend that regime the international legitimacy that it so desperately craves. It's been said that the biggest export from Putin's regime to the West is not oil, it's not gas, it is corruption. And I fully agree with that sentiment, except, of course, that is a two-way street. For someone to be able to export corruption, someone else somewhere needs to be willing to import it. And unfortunately, there has been no shortage of those in the West who have shown their willingness to be complicit, to be the enablers of the Putin kleptocracy by accepting these people and their dirty money that are being looted from the people of Russia by these cronies and oligarchs around Putin, and then stashed away and hidden away and spent in Western countries. And so I want to make two final brief points about what would be very important to see from the international community as we approach that critical moment in the mid-2020s. First of all, it's the point of that financial integrity. Just before he returned home to Moscow, Alexei Navalny discussed with his colleagues a short list of key cronies and oligarchs around Vladimir Putin who should be prime targets for those personal visa and financial sanctions from Western democracies, above all from the European Union. Now, since December of 2020, the European Union, of course, has a Magnitsky-type mechanism for individual sanctions on human rights abusers and on corrupt actors, the product of years of work and advocacy by many people in many countries, including many people in Russia. This mechanism should be used, and I think it's very important to finally send that message that those people who attack and violate the most basic norms of the rule of law and democracy in our country, in Russia, will no longer be accepted, either them or their dirty money, in Western jurisdictions, in Western banks, in Western financial systems, on Western soil. We're not talking about sanctions on Russia, again, as the Kremlin propaganda likes to portray. None of us advocate for sanctions against our country. We are talking about individual sanctions on those corrupt and abusive actors who are the key figures in this regime. As Boris Nemtsov used to say, do not punish the country, punish the scoundrels. That is a key difference. So those targeted personal sanctions directed against the Kremlin's dark money abroad, including in the European Union, including those key oligarchs like Abramovich and Usmanov, who are mentioned on the Navalny list, that should be a very important priority going forward. And a final thing concerns political integrity. I want to take this opportunity to thank two people who are on this call today, who led on the passage last September of European Parliament Resolution 2020-2777 RSP, resolution on Russia after the poisoning of Alexei Navalny. This is, of course, Andrius Kubilius, the rapporteur on Russia, and also Sergei Lagodinsky, the Russia rapporteur for the Green Group in the European Parliament, who's also here with us virtually today. Many important things in that resolution, but among the most important point was Article 8 of that resolution, which stated that the constitutional amendments rammed through by Putin under the cover of the pandemic in the summer of 2020 have been illegally enacted and are incompatible with international standards. These are quotes from a resolution. Very important determination by the European Parliament, because the way those constitutional amendments were jammed through in at least three important ways violated Russian legislation on how to enact constitutional amendments. I'm not going to take up time with the legal details, but the most important way was the farcical and sham fashion that this so-called plebiscite was organized, with no campaigning allowed, with no international or independent oversight over the vote count, with no observers from the Council of Europe or the OSCE allowed, with a week-long voting held in makeshift locations like park benches and shopping trolleys, with no control over the ballot stored overnight, and so on and so forth. By the accounts from vote monitoring NGOs, this has been the most fraudulent result of any vote held under Putin in the past 20 years. So these constitutional amendments, as stated in European Parliament resolution, are illegally enacted and therefore null and void. And so when Putin attempts to cling on to power beyond the end of his current and final mandate in May of 2024, this will call for a very, very clear policy of non-recognition on the part of Western democracies of this illegitimate usurpation, exactly the same as we saw with regard to Lukashenko's regime last August. And so again, it is only for Russian citizens to be the drivers and the actors of that political change in Russia, and that change will come. But we do expect our Western friends and partners, above all our neighbors on the European continent, to stay true to your values and not enable and not be complicit in the continued abuse of power by Putin's Kremlin.
Well, thanks a lot, Vladimir. I don't know, my internet is very weak. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. So now we are moving to members of our own parliament, and I would like to ask, all my colleagues to speak up to 3, minutes, not much more, 4 minutes will be a total limit. And we have representatives from all the different groups. So I'm really very, very happy that all those events in Belarus, in Russia, it brought us into some kind of very active community of members of our own parliament from different countries, different parties. And I am very happy to ask our colleague Michael Galler from EPP Group, our coordinator in Foreign Affairs Safed Committee. Michael, please, floor is yours. 3-4 minutes. Unmute your microphone.
Ah, yeah.
Unmute your microphone. I don't see.
Yes. Is it now? Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
It's okay. So thank you very much, dear friends from Russia and Belarus. Thank you, Andrius, for organizing this once again. I mean, we can, from our side, only repeat our relentless and unwavering support, both for the developments for the democracy fighters in Belarus and also for those in Russia who are going their way now, not only in Moscow and St. Petersburg, but that is one of the major changes, to see it in so many cities in parallel and with the motivation there. It is a long road to go. In Russia, the ruling structures have everything to lose, so they will use everything to resist it, and we will see, I'm afraid, a lot of more of brutality. And the same in a way applies to Belarus, where we are or have been already in quite some months of very concrete engagement and meetings and solidarity action, now also heading to the 7th of February, where many actions are also planned. I would like to confirm the very strong positions of the European Parliament that we have taken over the last months, both with regard to Belarus and to Russia, especially in connection with Alexei Navalny. And the call from the Parliament for sanctions is very clear when it comes to Belarus, to apply it far broader than the list that we have got by now. There are names available of collaborators of those who are violating the laws, and we should definitely apply our new mechanism, our European Global Human Rights Sanction Mechanism, which we call short the European Magnitsky Act. We urge the our External Action Service and our member states to really do it, and also to have the next package for Belarus, including those entrepreneurs close to the regimes who managed to get off the list. There are those who did actively counter the plans in our services to have them on the list, and they succeeded in the first run. I hope that we are going to succeed to have them in the next round. And with regard to Russia and Belarus, the parliament with a 2/3 majority speaks of sanctions, not only the personal sanctions, but also Nord Stream 2. I'm one of the supporters of that. We have different opinions in my country, Germany, on that, but I think the current development makes me hopeful that also in Germany, the mood will step by step change in order to sanction Putin over this infamous pipeline. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Mikhail. Now I'm asking another representative of Germany, from Germany, exactly Sergei Lagodinsky, who was mentioned by Vladimir Kara-Murza, our good friend from Green Group. Sergei, please, floor is yours, and then 3 or 4 minutes.
Great, thanks so much. And I assume I can maybe speak Russian so that we, that our colleagues from the other side understand a little bit better. Так как у меня всего... Здравствуйте, друзья.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to see so many familiar faces. We have not so much time, so let me briefly comment what I would like to comment. First of all, our stance, as for the intervening or meddling into the Russian processes. The thing here is not only about Navalny for you, for Russia, but rather for us. The chemical agents, banned chemical agents were used against him, and pertaining to the Russian legislation, we can see its conflict with the European Court resolution. We are now protecting our own European interest, or our common European interest, rather. One more point. Speaking of sanctions, they are used not only to educate someone or correct someone's behavior, they are designed to teach everyone what's allowed and what's not allowed in the EU. Don't forget the shooting in the downtown Berlin and Bundestag attacks. We do have some sovereign EU interests here being protected with the sanctions, and it's in no way intervening into Russian developments. Let me bring up one more point: expectation management. It's something which I consider really important for our bilateral relations. We do our best in order to find new effective ways to influence our Russian partners. It's extremely hard. There are three reasons for that. First, there are political reasons. I'm not going to delve into Nord Stream sanctions and so on. It was mentioned right before me. The second reason is legal, bureaucratic reason. The thing is, sanctions are not so easy to apply and organize. We can demand, and we do that, we demand sanctions, but Mr. Borrell has his hands tied because the EU members have to initiate sanctions. If Berlin, Paris, and other countries are silent, and that's what I see actually, it means Borrell cannot do anything about that. The thing is, the member states have to initiate the sanctions. Apart from that, we have too many legal issues related closely to sanctions. And in this case, we have to work on shifting from legal arena to political arena, because sanctions have to be not legal, they have to be political. We are all scared here of the sanctions later being abolished or lifted by the European Court. I'm almost done. I can assure you we are going to do what we can, but sometimes our vision and our willingness are not always easily implemented. I wish you all strength, and we can assure you that we are together with you. We can guarantee that we will support you. Thank you so much, Sergei. I believe we will have to look at the sanction mechanisms deeper, how they are designed in the EU. It's great that we have this Magnitsky Act, but we still need to perfect the tools that go together with it.
Represents Renew Group, Liberals, together with French group of Macron Party. So Bernard, please, floor is yours.
Andrew, after this very fascinating overview of the political situation in the entire Russian Federation, I am more and more convinced that we are witnessing in French une fin de règne, the end of this regime in Russia. This fin de règne, this end of the Putin regime could last either 3 months or 3 years. I don't know. Nobody knows. But it will end rather quickly now. So what could we do? We, the European Parliament, we, the members of the European Parliament. Targeted sanctions, certainly yes. Certainly yes. And targeted sanctions much more than sanctions against Russia or even against a Russian economy. What else? Certainly toughening our words and our voices. Words and voices in politics, it's not nothing. They are tools, they are political tools, and this is very, very important. What's more? On my opinion, on my eyes, we should try to nurture the political debate in Russia and the political hope of a new relationship between the Russian Federation and the European Union. How could we do that? We should address the Russian people, the Russian nation directly. We should speak to them, not to Mr. Putin, to everybody in Russia, to the nation, or to the nations with an S, because Russia is a federation, and to tell them first our wish to coexist with Russia and to cooperate with Russia with 2 aims. First, stabilization of the continent, and second, the economical and industrial cooperation between the 2 pillars of the continent. And the 2 pillars of the continent are obviously the European Union and the Russian Federation. We should tell them that it would be easy, possible, certainly wishable, but easy and possible with only 2 conditions. First, a peaceful regime in Moscow, and second, a civilized regime, kulturny, по-русски, regime in Moscow. At those 2 conditions, we would be open, we, the European Union, at least we, the Parliament, we would be open and more than wishing to cooperate and build a new relation between the EU and the Russian Federation.
Well, thanks a lot, Bernard. Thanks a lot. Perfect. And now I will ask Madame Viola von Cramon, Greens from Germany, to speak, and then I will ask President Jerzy Buzek to be ready. So, Viola, please, floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Andrius, and thanks to all the others who have organized this very, very important and exciting webinar today. Well, indeed, as Sergei has said in the beginning or in the middle of the event, it's very important to listen to the colleagues all over Russia and also from Belarus, where we are even more in a constant exchange, at least since the movement and the protest has begun. I think it is important to stress what Sergei has said. I mean, we are really trying to build up a constant pressure on our, let's say, member states, on the national capitals. While we know that the sanction mechanism, and maybe how Heidi Hautala could say more concerning the concrete questions in the chat, how this mechanism can work and how can we include, in particular, some of the oligarchs which were mentioned in the chat. I cannot really refer to that. But what we need is definitely this. Oh, somebody is talking, Andreas. So what we need is definitely this pressure on the individual capitals. Michael Gala has rightly mentioned again Nord Stream 2. This could be an instrument, and we from the Greens have always rejected that, have always objected that, have always resisted this as an increasing tool coming from the Kremlin and an absolutely useless instrument for the European Union, while it is against the interest of most of the states in the European Union. So, of course, we do what we can. And also what Vladimir has said about this then hopefully starting process of delegitimization after 2024, in case Putin will declare himself as president after this kind of election. This is absolutely necessary, and we see. I mean, we are not completely successful in Lukashenko's case, and it will be even more difficult in the Russian case. But nevertheless, it is important from the European Union side to give a commitment to the people in Russia, as we did it in Belarus. And also, I would like to stress that observing the region for a long time, I've never thought that the Russian, let's say, as you call it, nationwide movement has actually copied some of the strategies coming from Belarus. So there were spillover effects coming from the protest movement during the last weeks and months from the Belarusian civil society, from the Belarusian opposition, from the Belarusian dissidents, and being picked up now in the Russian context. So actually, I mean, I'm ready to support you in any way. We are available at any time, you know this, and we will do anything from the European Parliament side to make sure that at one point also the Russian Federation becomes a democratic society. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Viola. And now I'm asking, Jerzy Buzek.
Thank you.
From Poland, just a moment, I will introduce you, former Prime Minister, former President of European Parliament, and one of the leaders of Solidarność movement, back in 80s and 90s. So Jerzy knows everything, and please, Jerzy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much, Andrius, and all of you from Russia and Belarus for all the speeches, all the information. For me, well, I treated very, even personally and emotionally, because I remember in my country 4 decades ago, in the martial law, in the time of martial law, very similar situations. While to believe in democracy is always very important and could help very much. Our first obligation, I think, in the European Parliament and in the West is not to forget what is nowadays happening in Russia and Belarus, and our memory is the most important in this case. Never forget. And let me say, we discuss how to help civil society, to help you even personally, our guests, our friends from Russia and Belarus, how to stand in solidarity with all your civil society. My question is, maybe there are any specific measures. We did not use them. So please support us, because we know very well targeted individual sanctions. It was mentioned by my colleagues. I would like to repeat it once again. We've got also problem if we should finance the regime and help it to thrive economically is a big question of Nord Stream 2 today for us. And I'm openly saying it that I'm also very keen to know how do you see the situation from the point of view of this gas pipeline from Russia to Germany. And another issue is our presence in Russia, Belarus, individual presence. I am on the Putin's blacklist, so for me it is impossible to go to Russia. But still, let's say, our high representative of the European Union, it means Minister of Foreign Affairs, is present nowadays in Moscow. I would like to know your position for his presence. We believe him to take a position on our values and finally expect him to support those Russians who took to the streets expressing their hope to live a democratic country with no corruption and with free elections. But how do you see such a presence in your country? And well, I can assure you, overwhelming majority of our colleagues from the European Parliament are absolutely with you, fighting for democracy. And this is a reminder for us, we should never forget what it means to live in democratic country and how much we should defend it outside European Union and also inside European Union if it is necessary. So thank you very much for your discussion. We are absolutely with you also in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Jerzy Buzek. Now I'm asking my colleague Rasa Juknevičienė, and after her we shall have then Urmas Paet from Estonia. Rasa, please, floor is yours. Rasa is former defense minister, now a member of European Parliament from our EPP group, also from Lithuania.
Thank you so much. I will switch into Russian. I would like to use my Russian knowledge as speaking with our friends.
Dear friends, thank you very much for your fight, for your struggle for freedom. This is not just your struggle for your freedom. This is also a struggle for our freedom, for Europe without dictatorships. In Lithuania, we have just celebrated the 30th anniversary of the fight for our freedom, when the European Union brought tanks to crack down on independent democratic people. 30 years ago in Moscow, in Petersburg, just under 500,000 people took to the streets to support our fight for freedom. Today, it's time for us to stand with you, to support you. But the change in Russia will only happen when people in Russia want this change, when the majority of people want this change. The propaganda in Russia, which I watch sometimes, tell us that we are Russophobes. But I think the biggest Russophobe in the world is Putin. He is the one who is afraid of his people. He is the one who is afraid of people living in freedom. I would like to mention just one more point about faith. Faith that Russia can be different is a highly important factor now, not just in Russia, but also in Europe. Even here in Lithuania, we have a strong group of people who think there will never be democracy in Russia, that now there is only a political struggle there and Russia will never be different, it will never be democratic. I don't think that way. I think people in Russia can live in democracy just like others do. So I think it's really important to us that this faith should be strong across the entire Europe and within Russia itself as well. And Belarus is a good example of this, when Belarusians showed that the faith that they can live differently is powerful. So I wish you all the best this year, because the Duma elections are coming up soon. I believe that these elections can be more or less fine, even though it will be very difficult. We are going to keep track of this and help you in any way we can. Thank you very much, and we stand for your freedom and our freedom. Thank you very much, Rasa.
Now, I see that really, since I'm was manager of moderator, of all our conversations, we are late. And I see that quite many of our colleagues, from European Parliament were not able to wait till this moment. I don't know if Urmas is still here, but I saw that Heidi Hautala, she sends everybody, best wishes in the chat. I saw that Mr. Antonio Lopez Isturiz White also sends best regards. I don't know if we had also Rafael Glucksmann from France, but he is perhaps not here. Sandra Kalnete. So all there is much bigger number of friends of democracy fight in Belarus and Russia, but not everybody was able now to take the floor. So if I do not see that anybody else, from European Parliament would like to jump in, then we are coming to the final stage of our conversation. I will give the floor immediately back to Sergei Medvedev. My final conclusion, is very simple. I will repeat what Rasa have said. Democracy definitely will come also to Russia. Democracy is coming to Belarus. Democracy came earlier to Ukraine. That is major developments. We are admiring what you are doing back in Belarus and Russia, and we're looking what we can do here in Brussels, in European Parliament, in different member states, how really to make defense of democracy one of our common priorities. And that is why the whole event today was called, it has a title, Defending Democracy in Russia and Belarus. So you are doing really great job back in Russia and Belarus. We need to do our job on our side, in the Western community, in European Union, together with our friends from United States, from other democracies. We need to show in a very clear way that democracies really are stronger than authoritarian regimes, despite the fact how much, authoritarian regimes are trying to use, their money to suppress all freedom and democracy and possibility for people to make the choice. So, спасибо большое, Сергей, я передаю вам слово обратно.
Thank you very much, Sergei. The floor is yours again. I don't know if anyone else will speak on behalf of the European Parliament, or maybe someone else will want to say a few final words. I am just confusing all the languages I know. Maybe Zhanna will want to say something too. Yes, thank you, Andrius. I will say a few words as well. I'm really happy we had this conversation in this broad format. I'm glad that we could hear the voices of members of the European Parliament. It's highly important. It's critically important these days, because these regimes are going into a completely new stage of their development today. And of course, the level of responsibility for our European colleagues, for the European Parliament, is much higher than before. I think that the previous politics, the politics of appeasement, the politics of dialogue is not possible anymore. We need more bold measures. We need more harsh rhetoric. And the question in the chat was, what could Joseph Borrell say in Russia? I think he could say, either I have an opportunity to speak to Navalny, or I'm not coming to Moscow. I think Borrell is already in Moscow. I guess there will be a conversation with Lavrov about climate change or something. They are like the biggest environmentalists today, evidently. So they're also going to talk about the Middle East, about Ukraine. So this is the typical dialogue format, and I understand that this is something that Lavrov will say is just internal affair, and that's it.
So it's time we look at Russia as the established dictatorship, and the EU has to build their policy accordingly. So I hope these points were noted by our European colleagues, and we will continue this conversation. We have to understand that in this situation, when the internal institutions are continuously demolished and destroyed from within the country, and the country is already at a clear dictatorship, the external factors influence is growing. In general, I would repeat what one of our colleagues said today. That's our task, people inside the Russia, the Russians, to be the key drivers of the change. Zhanna, maybe you would say a couple of words to wrap up. Yeah, thank you. I would try to be brief. Thank you, dear organizers. Andrius Kubilius, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to the European Parliament. Two important things happened today. We heard some new voices, saw some new faces today, and this makes it possible for so many people what's going on in Russia. It's important. Why? Yesterday, I was talking to CNN, and they were asking me, listen, you had this referendum, constitutional amendment referendum. We saw 2/3 of the country supporting Putin. So I'm saying again that it's important to spread the word about the current sentiments in the country. And here I would thank you once again and say that despite this unprecedented violence we see towards the protesters, we still see a high level of activism, and I hope we will see positive changes very soon. And Anastasia Karimova, Foundation for Democratic Development, please. Thank you, dear participants. We are greatly thankful to Andrius Kubilius for this wonderful forum. We hope this conversation to be continued and to be together in our fight for democracy. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Sergei, for your great work of moderator. Thanks, Zhanna. Thanks, Anastasia. Thanks to all our Russian and Belarusian colleagues. We are supporting you, and we really want the democracy to be established in both your countries. Let me repeat once again, the processes we see being promoted by you so courageously are not to be stopped entirely. A dictator might suspend these processes with enormous violence, but these processes are historical. They are important not only for Russia and Belarus, they are also important for us, for the entire Europe, and for the entire world. Because democracies do not fight each other. They cooperate. They find opportunities to develop together and to improve life. So the dream that was already mentioned today and that was brought up in the 19th century, it's about hope for the better future and fight for the better future. And this fight should be shared This is something that we have in common, you and us. We want to get the tools and mechanisms available in the Western world useful for you and more effective. Thank you all for your time, for this workshop. I wish all of you best of luck in this hard fight. Let's be together. Thank you.